The sky turned black at noon, as alien ships the size of mountains arrived over America demanding tribute or annihilation. Their voices, shaking buildings as people screamed in the streets. Mothers grabbed their children and ran through traffic that was frozen in fear. People leaving cars on the highway to look up at the dark clouds rolling around the alien crafts that hummed like 1,000 storms waiting to fall. The news cameras caught it all, broadcasting the shadows of the ships over fields and cities as soldiers stood frozen with their rifles pointed at nothing, unsure if bullets would matter against the cold giants above. The president was hidden underground in a bunker somewhere, while the people were left to watch the sky in terror. The ships lowered themselves so close to the ground that windows shattered and dogs howled in fear as the alien voices spoke in a language that cracked the air, a language that felt like thunder under your skin, promising mercy if the people of Earth would kneel, promising destruction if they would not. A boy in a small town stood outside a gas station, clutching his toy robot to his chest as he watched the ship above him covering the sun, making the world dark. The air smelled like burnt wires and wet earth as the clouds swirled around the alien metal above. A father pulled his daughter close, whispering to her to close her eyes, but she would not. She wanted to see what had come to her world. The alien voices continued to speak with cold promise, demanding that the people gather their tribute to prove their loyalty to the new rulers of the sky. The people did not know what tribute they wanted. They only knew the fear that crept into their hearts as the shadows of the ships covered the playgrounds, the football fields, the small shops with open signs, still buzzing in the dark air. The boy at the gas station looked at his mother as she tried to pull him away, but he would not move. He wanted to see if the aliens had faces. He wanted to know if they had eyes that could see him. As the clouds above split with light and the beams from the ships scanned the ground with cold blue energy, the ground vibrated as the ships adjusted their positions, shifting like mountains. In the sky, a group of teenagers filmed on their phones near a church parking lot, daring each other to get closer to the beam of blue light that moved over the street, catching a street sign that bent and twisted under the pressure of the alien scan. The light was cold and bright, and it felt like needles on the skin as the people who stepped too close felt their hair rise and their bodies tremble. The aliens continued to speak over and over, demanding tribute, promising mercy, demanding tribute, promising mercy. The words echoed off the buildings like a ghost in the air. A man in a business suit dropped to his knees in the middle of the road, hands lifted to the sky, tears running down his face as he promised them anything to leave his family alive, to leave him alive. The ships above did not answer, they only hummed louder, the sky growing darker as if the sun had died. The boy at the gas station squeezed his toy robot tighter as he looked up, his eyes reflecting the blue lights that washed over him, and he whispered to himself a promise that if the aliens wanted to take his world, they would have to take him to the wind. Picked up, sending trash and leaves spiraling into the air as the alien ships continued to hang over America like judgment, waiting for the answer to their demand as the people of Earth held their breath. In the silence that followed, the Earth seemed to hold its breath as the alien ships hovered above cities and fields, casting shadows that swallowed entire neighborhoods. People hid inside their homes, clutching radios and phones, listening for any word of what to do. A mother sat with her daughter in the hallway of a small house, the walls shaking gently as the ships moved above like quiet storms. She whispered stories to her child about the sky before it turned black, about the birds and the sunrise, trying to keep the fear out of her voice as the girl pressed her ear against the ground, listening to the distant hum of the alien engines. Above, a group of soldiers stood on a rooftop with binoculars trained on the dark sky, their commander telling them to stay ready, even as they knew there was nothing they could do if the aliens decided to end everything. The air was heavy with the smell of rain and burning metal as the clouds above the ships churned in slow spirals. People peeked through curtains and cracked windows to see beams of cold blue light moving slowly across the empty streets, like giant eyes searching for movement. There were whispers that the aliens had demanded tribute, but no one knew what that meant. Rumors spread that they wanted the Earth's gold or its water or its people to be taken away to their cold worlds. The mother on the floor with her daughter prayed silently, her hands trembling as she held the girl's hair back from her face, telling her to be brave if the lights came for them. In another part of the city, a man stood outside, with his hands lifted toward the sky, screaming at the ships to leave his family alone, demanding that they take him instead. if they wanted tribute, but the ships made no reply. The wind stirred the leaves and papers in the streets, as the lights from the ships washed over empty playgrounds, over abandoned cars, over dogs barking in backyards at shadows they could not understand. The people in the city could see their reflections in the dark metal of the ships above their own frightened faces, staring back at them as if the sky itself had become a mirror of their fear. In the middle of a highway, a woman held a sign above her head that read, "We will not bow," her arms shaking as tears ran down her face, while others watched from the windows of their stopped cars, afraid to join her but unable to look away. The ships continued to hover, their engines rumbling softly like thunder, waiting above the people. The blue lights paused on the woman with the sign, and she closed her eyes, waiting for the end, but the lights moved on, leaving her standing in the middle of the road, breathing hard. The mother with her daughter in the hallway felt the ground shake as the ships moved lower, their voices speaking again, in that cold language that made the windows rattle, demanding tribute, promising mercy, demanding tribute, promising mercy, over and over, as if the words were a curse on the air. The mother hugged her daughter close, telling her to cover her ears, but the girl would not. She wanted to hear what the sky was saying. She wanted to know what they would do next as the light from the ships washed over the rooftops, turning everything in the city to shades of blue and gray, as the people waited for the moment when the aliens would decide if they would live or die. Deep in the deserts of Nevada, where the sand was red under the dead sky, there was a base that did not exist on any map, hidden beneath layers of rock and old lies. It waited silent while the world above trembled under the shadow of the alien ships. Men and women in dark uniforms moved quickly down narrow hallways, lights flickering as the ground vibrated with the hum of engines from the sky. Above, in the heart of this hidden place, was a room cold and wide, with steel walls covered in wires and screens showing the chaos across America. Technicians whispered to each other, voices tight with fear as they checked systems that had not been touched in years. In the center of the room there was a platform covered in heavy chains that were thick as a man's torso, each link blackened by time and heat. The platform was surrounded by red lights that pulsed slowly like the heartbeat of something waiting for the right moment to wake up. The technicians looked at each other when the order came through the radio, a voice that was calm but shaking at the edges, telling them it was time to release. Protocol Titan. The technicians moved quickly, typing in codes, their fingers trembling as they entered the final sequence. The chains began to rattle against the platform, the sound sharp and metallic as the lights above turned from red to white. The ground shook harder, dust falling from the ceiling as something on the platform began to move under the chains, something massive and dark, a shape that shifted as the steel links strained against it. In the control room above, a general watched through a reinforced window, his hand gripping the railing so hard that his knuckles turned white. He remembered when they built it, when they swore they would never use it, that it was only a deterrent, a threat to remind the stars that Earth would not be taken without a fight. But now the stars had come to take, and the deterrent had become their last hope. The shape under the chains let out a low sound that rolled through the concrete like thunder, a deep growl that made the technicians step back, fear in their eyes, as they watched the chains begin to snap one by one, the links breaking with loud cracks that echoed through the underground chamber. The thing on the platform stood up, slowly rising to its full height, its head brushing against the ceiling as it looked around with eyes that burned like coals in the dark. The technicians could see the shape more clearly now, a creature of iron and old scars, covered in armor plates that moved like muscle, its arms long and heavy, ending in hands that looked like they could crush tanks. Its chest opened with each breath, revealing a glow deep inside like molten light. The creature looked toward the reinforced glass where the general stood watching, and for a moment the general felt like it was looking directly into him, seeing every fear he had ever carried. Then the creature spoke, its voice deep and rough, promising only one thing to the sky that had come to demand tribute. The promise was death to the invaders. The promise was defiance. The promise was war. The creature stepped off the platform, chains falling around its feet like broken promises as it walked toward the tunnel that led up toward the surface, where the alien ships waited in the sky above America. The creature walked through the long tunnel, its footsteps shaking dust from the walls as it moved toward the light ahead. The ground trembled under its weight as it climbed the slope that led from the darkness of the bunker to the burning wind of the desert above. The air was sharp and hot, carrying the scent of sand and smoke as the creature stepped out into the open, under the wide sky that was filled with shadows. The alien ships hovered in the distance, massive shapes that blocked the sun, their engines rumbling softly like a warning. The creature turned its head, slowly taking in the sight of the world it had been born to protect. The ground cracked beneath its feet as it took another step forward, its armor shifting with a sound like grinding stone. The glow in its chest pulsed with each breath, casting light on the sand around it as if marking its path forward. In the distance, soldiers watched from behind barricades, their hands shaking on their rifles as they saw the creature rise from the earth. Some of them fell to their knees, others simply stared, unable to look away from the being that had come from the ground like a promise. The alien ships began to move closer, the clouds swirling around them as beams of blue light swept across the desert, scanning the creature with cold precision. The creature looked up at the lights, its eyes burning brighter as it lifted its heavy arms toward the sky, letting out a sound that was part roar, part thunder, shaking the air for miles around. In a small town nearby, people came out of their houses to see the shape on the horizon. The children climbed onto rooftops to watch the giant move across the sand, its steps slow but unstoppable. A father lifted his son onto his shoulders, pointing toward the creature, telling him that it was here to protect them, that it was here to fight for them. The creature moved through the ruins of an old gas station, its massive hands brushing against the rusted signs that swung in the hot wind. It paused for a moment, looking down at a toy robot half buried in the sand. The glow in its chest flickered as it reached down, lifting the toy carefully before placing it on top of a broken car, as if promising that the fight was not for the earth but for the small things, the precious things that people left behind. As they ran, the alien ships began to circle above the creature, their engines growing louder as beams of light converged on its position. The sand lifted into the air, swirling around the creature as it stood tall, its head tilting back as it let out another roar, a sound that rolled across the desert like a wave, shaking the hearts of those who heard it. The soldiers behind the barricades found themselves standing straighter, their fear turning into something else, something that felt like hope as they watched the creature defy the sky. The alien ships began to fire thin lines of blue energy that sliced through the air, striking the ground near the creature, sending sand and rock into the sky. But the creature did not fall. It raised its hands, catching the energy in its palms, the glow in its chest growing brighter as it absorbed the light before throwing it back into the sky. In a burst of burning brilliance, the creature took another step forward toward the alien ships, promising nothing but war in return for their demands. People gathered on rooftops and highways, watching as the creature walked through the burning wind of the desert toward the cities, where the alien ships hovered like shadows waiting to strike. Children sat on the hoods of cars with their parents, hands over their mouths as they watched the giant move through the smoke, its footsteps steady and slow, its glowing chest pulsing with each breath it took. The soldiers who had once stood frozen now found themselves stepping forward, rifles lowered. As they watched the creature pass by, some of them raised their hands in silent salute, others simply nodded, tears in their eyes, as they saw hope take shape in iron and light. The creature turned its head, sometimes looking at the people who watched it from rooftops, its burning eyes meeting theirs for a moment before it continued forward, as if promising them it would not stop, as if promising them it would fight, even if it meant the end. In a city filled with ash and broken glass, a girl stood in the window of an old apartment building, clutching a small dog to her chest as she watched the creature approach. The alien ships above had begun to move closer, their engines humming as beams of cold blue light swept across the streets, scanning the rubble for signs of resistance. The creature paused at the edge of the city, looking up at the ships. As its chest glowed brighter, the hum of the aliens grew louder, as if they recognized the threat that had come to meet them. The girl in the window pressed her hand against the glass, whispering to the dog that the monster was here to save them, even as tears ran down her face, and the air outside grew heavy with the scent of smoke. The creature stepped into the city, its heavy feet cracking the pavement, its arms brushing against the broken walls of buildings that leaned in the wind. It moved carefully around the cars, abandoned in the streets, its head turning slowly as it looked at the remnants of a world that had been built to protect. It stopped for a moment in front of a small shop, its windows shattered, its shelves empty. The creature reached down and lifted a fallen flag from the rubble, holding it in its massive hand before carefully placing it on a ledge. Above the door, the flag fluttered weakly in the hot wind as the creature turned its gaze back to the sky where the alien ships circled like predators, waiting for the right moment to strike. The creature let out a deep sound, a promise of defiance that rolled through the streets like thunder. People heard it in their homes, in their shelters, in the hospitals, where they hid with the wounded, and they felt something in their hearts, a spark of courage as they watched the monster lift its arms toward the sky. The alien ships began to fire thin lines of blue energy that burned through the air, striking the ground around the creature, but it did not fall. It stepped forward. Through the smoke, each step a promise that it would not kneel, that it would not offer tribute, that it would only offer war. The girl in the window saw the creature lift its head, its eyes burning bright as it faced the alien ships, and she knew in that moment that the monster was fighting for them all. People gathered on rooftops and highways, watching as the creature walked through the burning wind of the desert toward the cities, where the alien ships hovered like shadows waiting to strike. Children sat on the hoods of cars with their parents, hands over their mouths as they watched the giant move through the smoke, its footsteps steady and slow, its glowing chest pulsing with each breath it took. The soldiers who had once stood frozen now found themselves stepping forward, rifles lowered. As they watched the creature pass by, some of them raised their hands in silent salute. Others simply nodded, tears in their eyes, as they saw hope take shape in iron and light. The creature turned its head, sometimes looking at the people who watched it from rooftops, its burning eyes meeting theirs for a moment before it continued forward, as if promising them it would not stop, as if promising them it would fight, even if it meant the end. In a city filled with ash and broken glass, a girl stood in the window of an old apartment building, clutching a small dog to her chest as she watched the creature approach. The alien ships above had begun to move closer, their engines humming as beams of cold blue light swept across the streets, scanning the rubble for signs of resistance. The creature paused at the edge of the city, looking up at the ships. As its chest glowed brighter, the hum of the aliens grew louder, as if they recognized the threat that had come to meet them. The girl in the window pressed her hand against the glass, whispering to the dog that the monster was here to save them, even as tears ran down her face, and the air outside grew heavy with the scent of smoke. The creature stepped into the city, its heavy feet cracking the pavement, its arms brushing against the broken walls of buildings that leaned in the wind. It moved carefully around the cars, abandoned in the streets, its head turning slowly as it looked at the remnants of a world that had been built to protect. It stopped for a moment in front of a small shop, its windows shattered, its shelves empty. The creature reached down and lifted a fallen flag from the rubble, holding it in its massive hand before carefully placing it on a ledge. Above the door, the flag fluttered weakly in the hot wind as the creature turned its gaze back to the sky, where the alien ships circled like predators, waiting for the right moment to strike. The creature let out a deep sound, a promise of defiance that rolled through the streets like thunder. People heard it in their homes, in their shelters, in the hospitals, where they hid with the wounded, and they felt something in their hearts, a spark of courage as they watched the monster lift its arms toward the sky. The alien ships began to fire thin lines of blue energy that burned through the air, striking the ground around the creature, but it did not fall. It stepped forward. Through the smoke, each step a promise that it would not kneel, that it would not offer tribute, that it would only offer war. The girl in the window saw the creature lift its head, its eyes burning bright as it faced the alien ships, and she knew in that moment that the monster was fighting for them all. The alien ships began to descend slowly, their cold blue lights sweeping across the ruined city as the creature stood in the street, its chest glowing brighter. With each breath it took, people hiding in the shadows of broken buildings peeked out to watch the monster face the sky, fear in their eyes, but also something else, something that felt like hope. The creature lifted its head as the ships circled above, engines humming like storms ready to fall. The wind picked up, sending papers and ash swirling around the creature as it stood, its massive arms hanging at its sides, its iron fingers curling slowly as the glow in its chest grew hot enough to light the street. Around it, the first beam of energy fell from the ships, a line of blue fire that struck the ground near the creature, sending chunks of concrete into the air. But the creature did not move. It took a step forward, the ground cracking beneath its feet as it roared into the sky, a sound that rolled through the city like an earthquake, shaking windows and hearts. The people watching from their hiding places felt the vibration in their bones. Some of them fell to their knees, hands over their ears, as the sound of defiance echoed through the broken streets. The alien ships responded with another beam of blue energy, this one striking the creature directly on its shoulder, sending sparks and shards of metal into the air. But the creature did not fall. It turned its burning eyes toward the ship that had fired, its chest pulsing brighter as it took another step forward. The people in the city began to move toward the windows and doorways, watching as the creature lifted its arms toward the sky. its iron hands opening wide as it caught the next beam of energy. In its palms, the light flooding around it as it absorbed the power of the glow in its chest, growing brighter, until it was almost blinding the creature. Let out another roar, and threw the energy back into the sky, a blast of burning light that struck the underside of the ship with a sound like thunder. The ship shuddered in the air, its engines whining as it pulled back smoke and blue sparks trailing from its metal skin. The people in the city saw it, and for the first time in days they cheered. They screamed into the wind, clapping their hands and shouting as the creature took another step forward, promising that it would not stop. The girl in the window hugged her dog tighter, tears running down her face as she watched the monster stand against the sky. The creature turned its head slightly, as if it could hear the voices of the people, as if it could feel their hope rising with each step it took. The alien ships began to regroup, their lights sweeping across the city as they circled above the creature, engines growing louder as if in warning, but the creature did not stop. It walked through the smoke and fire of the broken streets, each step shaking the ground as it moved toward the center of the city where the ships gathered. Waiting above, the creature lifted its head one more time and let out a roar that was not of fear but of promise, a promise that no tribute would be given, a promise that death would meet those who came to take. The alien ships began to gather above the heart of the city, engines humming like a storm ready to break open the sky as the creature walked through the burning streets, each step heavy and slow. People watched from windows and rooftops, their eyes wide as they saw the monster move through the smoke, its chest glowing brighter with each breath. It took its iron skin, scorched in places where the alien beams had struck, but it did not stop. It would not stop. The creature paused for a moment in the center of an old intersection, looking up at the ships as they circled above, their blue lights sweeping over the broken buildings, the cracked streets, the faces of the people who refused to hide anymore. The creature lifted its arms slowly, its iron fingers curling as the glow in its chest grew hot enough to light the shadows around it. Children sat on the shoulders of their parents, watching as the monster faced the sky. A boy holding a small flag in his hand, waving it weakly as if telling the creature that they were with it, that they would not run. The alien ships opened their weapons. Again, lines of cold, blue light cutting through the air, striking the ground around the creature, sending waves of heat and smoke into the air. But the creature did not fall. It lifted its arms and caught the light again, holding it in its hands as the glow in its chest pulsed brighter until it was like a small sun in the middle of the dark city. People shielded their eyes from the light as they watched the monster throw the energy back into the sky, a beam of burning white that tore through the air, striking one of the ships. With a sound like a bell breaking, the ship shuddered, pulling back smoke and blue sparks trailing behind it as it moved away from the creature. The people screamed and clapped, their voices rising into the night as they saw the monster stand alone against the sky, unbroken. The creature turned its head, slowly looking at the faces in the windows, the people on the rooftops, the children waving their small flags as tears ran down their cheeks, and for a moment, the monster paused, the glow in its chest pulsing slow and steady, as if it could feel the hope in the air. The alien ships regrouped above, engines growing louder as they formed a circle around the creature, their lights turning the night into day as they prepared to strike together. But the creature did not move. It lifted its head, letting out a roar that rolled through the city, shaking the ground and the hearts of the people who heard it, a roar that was not of fear but of promise, a promise that it would not kneel, that it would not give tribute, that it would only give war. The ships began to fire together, lines of blue energy striking the creature from all sides, the air filled with heat and light as explosions shook the buildings. The people watched in silence, holding their breath as the smoke rose around the creature. But when the light faded, the monster was still standing, its chest glowing like fire in the dark, its arms lifting toward the sky as it prepared to fight again. The creature stood in the center of the street as the alien ships circled above, engines screaming in the dark sky as the lights swept over the buildings and the people who watched from windows and rooftops. The air was filled with the scent of smoke and burning metal as the creature lifted its head, its iron arms rising slowly as the glow in its chest grew brighter, each pulse a heartbeat of defiance. The people did not run, they did not hide, they stood in the doorways and on the sidewalks, holding each other as they watched the monster face the sky. Some of them whispered prayers, others simply stood in silence, tears running down their faces as they held on to the hope that the creature gave them. The alien ships began to fire again, blue beams of cold energy cutting through the air, striking the ground around the creature, sending waves of dust and heat into the night. But the creature did not fall, it stepped forward. Through the smoke, its massive feet cracking the pavement, with each step its arms lifting higher as it caught the light in its hands. The glow in its chest growing so bright that it lit the streets like a sunrise. The people shielded their eyes as they watched the creature absorb the energy, the light, swirling around its iron skin like a storm before it threw it back into the sky. A beam of white fire that struck one of the ships with a sound like thunder. The ship jerked in the air, smoke pouring from its engines as it tried to pull away, but the creature did not stop. It took another step forward, its head tilting back as it let out a roar that rolled through the city, shaking the windows and the hearts of the people who heard it. A roar that told the sky that it would not surrender, that it would not give tribute, that it would only give war. The people began to cheer, their voices rising into the smoke-filled air as they saw the monster stand alone against the darkness, unbroken. A father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, pointing at the creature as he whispered that it was fighting for them, that it was fighting so they could live. The creature turned its burning eyes toward the people for a moment, the glow in its chest pulsing steady and warm, as if it could feel their hope rising. In the cold night, the alien ships regrouped, engines roaring as they began to lower closer to the ground, their lights bright and harsh as they prepared to end the fight once and for all. The creature did not move. It stood tall in the street, its arms lifting higher as the glow in its chest grew brighter until it was almost blinding. The people watched with tears and hope as the creature faced the sky one last time. The ships began to fire together, blue beams of energy cutting through the air, striking the creature from all sides. Explosions lighting the night as the ground shook beneath the people who watched. But the creature did not fall. It stood in the storm of light and fire, its chest burning like a sun as it let out a final roar that rolled through the city, a promise that even in the face of death, it would not kneel, it would not give tribute, it would only give defiance. The sky was alive with fire as the alien ships unleashed everything they had, the blue beams cutting through the darkness, striking the creature from every direction. The ground shook as explosions rolled through the empty streets, the windows rattling, as people held each other in silence, afraid to look, but unable to look away. The creature stood in the center of the storm, its iron skin cracking and sparking as the energy tore at it, the glow in its chest pulsing brighter with every hit, as if it was breathing in the light. The people watching from rooftops and windows saw the monster take a step forward, then another, the pavement breaking under its feet as it moved toward the heart of the city, where the ships circled like predators. The creature lifted its arms, the glow in its chest growing so bright that it turned the night into day, the light reflecting in the eyes of the children who watched with hands pressed against the glass. The creature roared, a sound that was deeper than thunder, a sound that rolled through the city and into the hearts of the people, reminding them that they were still alive, reminding them that they still had something worth fighting for. The alien ships adjusted their formation, beams of cold blue light converging on the creature as the engines roared and the air shimmered with heat. But the creature did not fall. It raised its arms higher, the glow in its chest swirling with energy as it pulled the power of the beams into itself, the metal on its arms glowing white hot as it absorbed the attack. The people could only watch as the creature let out one final roar before throwing the energy back into the sky. A blast of white fire that cut through the darkness and struck the lead ship with a force that shook the clouds. The ship exploded in a bloom of blue and white light, the shockwave rolling over the city like a wave of wind and dust. The people screamed in joy, their voices rising into the smoke-filled air as they saw the monster standing alone in the street, its chest still glowing as pieces of the burning ship fell like stars around it. The other alien ships began to pull back, engines screaming as they turned away from the city, their lights flickering as they disappeared into the clouds, leaving behind silence and smoke. The creature stood in the street, its arms slowly lowering as the glow in its chest pulsed slower, softer, like the heartbeat of a giant. The people stepped out of their homes into the streets, moving toward the creature, some of them crying, others lifting their hands in silent thanks. The children ran forward, waving their small flags and cheering as they looked up at the monster that had refused to kneel. The creature looked down at them, its burning eyes softening as it took one final breath, the glow in its chest fading slowly like the last light of the sun before it knelt in the street, the ground shaking softly as it came to rest its head, bowing as the people gathered around it, touching its iron skin, whispering, thank you, over and over, as the dawn broke over the city and the sky began to clear.